Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Lopes on Movies. My name is Joey Lopes, and today I am joined by Connor.
Hey, Joey, how you doing?
Pretty good. How about you?
Oh, we're just in quarantine month 2 now. Can you believe another month is down?
Has it really been 2 months?
I don't know. I think so. I remember that it started in March, and April's almost over, so I'm going to call it 2 months now.
Yeah, I was going to say it was like, like 100 days or, 1,000 days or something, just because I lost track of time. I don't know. I don't know what day it is. I don't know where I am. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, you see, I thought I was doing good, since the beginning. At the beginning, it's well chronicled in our shows, where the first couple of weeks I was just not doing well. Everything was combining, the day, night didn't matter. And then I got better, and now it's happening again, I think. So I don't know.
You're yo-yoing. You're going back and forth. I am. Between,
I'm yo-yoing, yes.
Yeah, that's too bad. I mean, I've been trying to keep myself busy. I've been working on a game. I'm making a video game, which is a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I got some stuff to do at work, of course. We're all keeping busy. But
yep.
The other thing that, of course, Connor, we have been able to do on this quarantine, as we've said in every episode during the lockdown, is watch some movies.
Yeah.
Get to watch some movies. Movies are great, aren't they?
Yeah. So
well,
I guess so to keep on our theme that we've been going on, we've been watching some more classics. You said to me, why don't you go through my Blu-ray collection and let's see, right?
Yeah, we've been just rating my Blu-ray collection for the past couple of weeks, and man, every time we do that, I'm just like, man, I love these movies. I never get a movie unless I really love it. So it's you can't go wrong. You go through my Blu-ray collection, no matter what, I'm gonna love it.
Right, and most likely I will too, which is good.
Yeah, so today is of course no exception, and since we've been kind of going through a bunch of major filmmakers from the past, I feel like the last couple of episodes of this show have been like a Cinema 101 class, and well, now we're probably going to talk about the absolute top of the Cinema 101 filmmaker list with today's episode, because of course we had to watch a film by the great master of suspense, Alfred Hitchcock.
Yes.
And I have a couple of Hitchcock movies on Blu-ray, but Connor, you decided you wanted to watch North by Northwest because you had not seen it before. So that is what we're going to talk about today.
Yep.
So, Connor, can you just kind of give us a little bit of the synopsis of this movie?
Sure, I can. North by Northwest. A New York City advertising executive goes on the run after being mistaken for a government agent by a group of foreign spies. It was directed by Alfred Hitchcock in 1959, starring Cary Grant, Eva Marie Saint, and James Mason. Joey, this was obviously a fantastic movie, and I think everybody knows that. I don't know if everyone's seen it, though, but man, is it great.
I think this is one of the Hitchcock movies that's still like very widely watched today. I mean, like Kurosawa and like these other filmmakers we've been talking about, they have massive bodies of work of just like countless movies that are incredibly influential and just amazing. So obviously Hitchcock, you have things like Rear Window, you have things like Psycho, Vertigo, and this is among them as one of those just continually watched Hitchcock movies. It's definitely one of his most famous today, nowadays. So yeah, definitely up there.
Yeah, it's excellent. I can't believe how many just classic films some of these great directors of the past made. Like just
I know.
10 out of 10 awesome movies, and that are pretty different too, but still maintain their voice also. And like this one is no exception to that. Also, it has all the classic like Hitchcock tropes in it, but just woven into just an excellent story. And I mean, where do you want to go here? Do you want to go right into the film, or do you want to go in a little bit more like Hitchcock and then
let's start broad and then kind of narrow our way back down to the.
I think that's probably the best way.
So, if you don't know that much about Alfred Hitchcock, you should, for one. And if you don't, though, I'm here to give you a little bit of basic information about the man. So, of course, Alfred Hitchcock is one of the most celebrated filmmakers of all time. I think even people that have not seen any of his movies know that he has that reputation. I think out of all of the major filmmakers of forever, I guess. I mean, like, people have dug into his body of work probably more than any other filmmaker, analyzing it from every possible angle. I mentioned he was like the definitive like cinema 101 director, and I kind of say that like a little bit in a cheeky way, like, because I don't want to give the impression that he's, just a guy you watch in school, because his movies are incredibly entertaining and just some of the absolute just best movies anybody could watch. But because of how unbelievably analyzed his movies have been, there's just a massive like academic thing surrounding Hitchcock movies. So you've almost definitely encountered him in a film class if you've taken one before. But beyond that, I mean, Hitchcock movies, when they came out like in his time, so like his Hollywood movies, he had like two periods. He basically was a silent film director in England like the 20s and 30s, and then he moved to Hollywood in the 40s, and just from there his movies just kind of took off. They were almost like I hate to bring up blockbusters, but like they were kind of like the blockbuster movies of that era in a way, with the main difference being that they were movies for adults, because that's what movies were back then. Movies were for adults. They weren't like today's blockbusters that are pretty nakedly like directed towards like the teenage boy demographic. And of course they worked for everybody, but I think that it's kind of like after Star Wars, the Hollywood just kind of started focusing most of their attention on like the male age 13 to 18 demographic.
The cool thing too about Hitchcock, like back then too, with it, like his movies were huge. People knew who Hitchcock was also.
Oh yeah,
they knew him, the director. Like he was like on the advertisements for a lot of the films.
Yeah,
like you could come see my next movie. It'll be this, and then he was like a big showman about it too. He also famously appears in all of his films. It's like people knew who Hitchcock was. It was a thing to see, like find the scene where Hitchcock was in, and usually it's not that hard to find. I mean, it's usually pretty clear.
Yeah, because he always had a cameo in like all of his movies.
Right. So it's everybody knew who Hitchcock was then, which I think kind of went away, really. Like a lot of people don't know who. I mean, even after Hitchcock, and especially now, like nobody knows who the heck is making their stuff now. They just know it's made by a corporation, I hope. But
I blame gamers for that.
Okay. Well, anyway,
I'm not going to elaborate on that point. So yeah, it was definitely a big deal. Like we watched the behind the scenes documentary of North by Northwest after watching it the other day, and like the original trailer was just Hitchcock talking about how he made this new movie, and you guys got to come see it. So it's pretty fun. But so why was Hitchcock so popular? Like what was it about him that really like drove people to see his movies? Well, there's a couple of things. There's a lot of hallmarks of the Hitchcock style and hallmarks of like the Hitchcock film that set it apart and kind of make him this very distinct voice. So for one, I introduced him earlier as, of course, the master of suspense. It was one of his the things that people called him back in the day. And to give an idea about what the whole suspense thing is, he used to talk about this story that he gave, where he tells a story about like, so two people are having a conversation at a table, right? And the table is rigged to explode with a bomb. Now, if the audience doesn't know about the bomb while they're watching the conversation and it explodes, that's like a big surprise. But if the audience knows that there's a bomb and that it's going to go off soon, it creates suspense because the audience is aware of something that's dangerous that the characters are not aware of. So in the former scenario, it creates say 15 seconds of surprise when it goes off and everybody's shocked. But the latter scenario can create 15 minutes of suspense because now this entire conversation that these characters are having is intense and interesting because that at some point that bomb is going to go off and they're in danger, right? So a lot of his movies feature these scenes of very well crafted and well executed suspense. So that's just one of his major things. Beyond that, he often worked with some of the most popular and most beloved stars of the time. So leading men like Cary Grant and Jimmy Stewart were very frequent appearers in Hitchcock movies. He's also, of course, very well known for his blonde leading ladies like Grace Kelly, Eva Marie Saint, Tippi Hedren. And these guys were movie stars. These were people that had a particular kind of charisma and identity unto themselves, and they kind of injected that into the movies that were that they starred in, and Hitchcock would take advantage of that. Like,
Oh
many
yeah,
filmmakers of that
there's
era.
like, I can't imagine these films without like these iconic stars in them. You know, they
Yeah.
add so much. I was trying to think also, and I think I brought this up before, like that like doesn't exist anymore really.
Hmm.
Like there was like a lot of these kind of guys and different actresses too that like could just like exploded off the screen, you know.
Hmm.
And I was thinking like who are those now? I was thinking maybe the one I came up with is like maybe Daniel Craig is like a similar-ish type, but like he's kind of boring. It's like
you can
maybe,
tell they're all like pale imitations.
yeah,
though,
it's like yeah, it's just not the same.
like when you watch a movie starring Cary Grant, it's like you're almost, especially if all you watch lately is like modern day movies or like recent movies, and you watch a movie starring a guy like Cary Grant, it's almost it feels like unreal how much charisma a guy like that has. Like, you
Yeah,
can't
I think
even
we'll get into
fathom.
that, but
Yeah.
Cary Grant has got to be like the coolest person ever. Like I
Yeah.
almost immediately like he wins you over and you're like, "Oh my god, I'm going to love this no matter what
Yeah.
happens." Like yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So a few more things that Hitchcock is well known for, of course, his inventive camera moves and just his understanding of filmmaking and editing. Actually, in that documentary that we watched after watching the movie, it mentioned how Hitchcock would storyboard every single element of his movies. So he knew exactly what the movie's edit was going to look like before shooting the movie. So he was obviously very conscious of all of the stuff that he was doing, but beyond that, he would just use the camera in kind of unconventional ways for the time. So, for example, like there are some Hitchcock scenes where he might shoot it from a high angle to increase suspense. There's a great moment of a shot that moves from just like kind of an eye level shot to a high angle shot in North by Northwest. That's always just incredible stuff. And he might shoot a scene that kind of like follows the characters going around 360 degrees to convey intimacy, things like that. And very much a unique director for his camera moves. Something that I particularly like about Alfred Hitchcock is, of course, his collaboration with the composer Bernard Herrmann. Much like other great collaborations between filmmakers and composers like Sergio Leone and Ennio Morricone, or Steven Spielberg and John Williams. Of course, the collaboration between Hitchcock and Bernard Herrmann was one of the greatest in film history. I think nobody would deny that. They collaborated on 7 films, including North by Northwest, and I thought this was kind of a funny story. Apparently, the relationship reportedly ended because Herrmann refused to make any changes to his scores at the behest of his director. And, you know, him and Hitchcock had a big falling out over this, so they never worked together again after that. There's a great quote that I found from Bernard Herrmann where he said, "I have the final say or I don't do the music. The reason for insisting on this is simply, compared to Orson Welles, a man of great musical culture, most other directors are just babes in the woods. If you were to follow their taste, the music would be awful." Ooh, that's harsh.
I have to imagine Hitchcock wouldn't have loved to hear that he was a babe in the woods.
Yeah, that he wasn't a man of great musical taste. You know, there's definitely like a little bit of elitism in that quote, but at the same time, we're talking about a guy like just an absolute master of film composing. So you gotta respect his words. You know, if you're gonna tell Bernard Herrmann that his music's not good enough, then like what's the matter with you? You know. Like his scores for Psycho and Vertigo are like absolutely considered iconic, especially Psycho, which is probably the one that has like penetrated the culture the most. Like everybody knows the like the string score in Psycho. It's just, you know, just a massive part of culture. And also, just another thing about Bernard Herrmann that I always appreciate is that he believed that film music should be able to stand on its own apart from the movie. So you should be able to listen to a film score and feel like you're listening to a complete package without it being part of the score, which is something that it sort of comes in ebbs and flows in film history. We're currently in like a period where the music in movies is pretty like bare bones and not designed to stand out in any particular way. There's that almost everybody kind of knows about the temp music situation in Hollywood these days, where a lot of the music is just kind of like interchangeable, like synthetic, not designed to stand out or make you feel any particular way. It's just kind of there, right? But back then, that was definitely not quite the case, and Bernard Herrmann was a major proponent of film scores that were very, very evocative on their own, beyond just helping tell the story of the movie.
Yeah.
So one of the things about North by Northwest, which I guess we'll get into now, is that it was written by the writer Ernest Lehman to be like the ultimate Hitchcock movie, like the Hitchcock movie to end all Hitchcock movies. And the way that he kind of did that was by incorporating a lot of the storytelling tropes that would appear in Hitchcock movies. So you got things like the innocent man wrongly accused, an ordinary person thrust into an extraordinary circumstance, mistaken identity. Like all of these things were like incorporated into the script to try to create like the ultimate thriller, like the ultimate Hitchcock, like just entertainment. Basically, it's this huge entertaining piece of filmmaking was the whole idea behind it. And man, it's incredible. Not just how much it holds up, because obviously it holds up, but just like it really is one of the purest bits of entertainment that you can ever watch.
Oh yeah, and this, I mean, the reason why they talk about Hitchcock as, you know, you say your film 101 is because almost every aspect of it is perfect. You went into the music, you went into, you know, all the other aspects. The technical aspects are great, but the script for North by Northwest especially might be, I you know, it's recency bias. I say it all the time, but I think it might be like the best thing I've ever like seen or like watched a film that just was so tight, like it just everything was just perfect, every beat was just excellent.
Yeah,
you know,
it's absolutely one of those movies that just runs like clockwork. Like every single aspect of it is so perfectly considered and flows into itself in such a beautiful way.
Yeah, and I mean ends tremendously also. Just, you know, I don't know if we can go to the ending at the end, but like just ending at the best possible time, so you're left with just like this like great feeling of excitement, like you just watched something awesome too. You know, there's no lull at the end. It just keeps you're just, it's great. Fantastic.
Yeah, that was something that I think I first heard this put this way when I watched the movie Whiplash. The director of that movie, of course, Damien Chazelle, he talked about how I don't remember where he learned this, but the idea being that movies don't need to have a denouement, or in other words, like a falling action after the climax where you wrap things up and let the movie kind of like peter out. He said, no, just end the movie at the end of the climax. Just stop, cut to credits, move on. And Hitchcock does that big time here in North by Northwest, and it just leaves you on like a perfect high.
It does,
which I think was the idea behind that, and it's just such a powerful technique for sure.
Oh yeah, perfect.
Yeah, so the I guess something that'll always really strike you when you watch a movie like this is just how incredibly witty it is. Like you mentioned the script just being like this perfect structural masterpiece, but the way that the characters talk to each other and the lines that they say and the way that the actors deliver them, there's so much just like genuine wit in every single line of dialogue. It puts Joss Whedon to shame. You know, like it puts him in his place. It gets him out of here. It puts him in the dumpster where he belongs. Okay, that's maybe a little bit exaggerated, but the point being that the characters in this movie say the most ridiculous things, the most ridiculous kind of like one-liners and like witty remarks and comebacks and things, but they sell it in such a genuine way.
And it's also in like the most extreme situations too that they're still delivering these lines also, especially mostly come from Cary Grant.
It's just so interesting to me how like one of the things I absolutely hate in like modern movies is when characters just like undersell the like enormity of a situation with like a dumb quip. So like I hate when characters like an explosion happens and then somebody says, well, that just happened.
Yeah, that feels very Michael Bay or something.
Like stuff like that. Like the wit in something like this is so much more like well considered and clever, and it just feels. And again, like the actors just absolutely deliver it in such a way that you buy it. Like it doesn't feel like an attempt at just being funny and you know undercutting the tension. It feels like something that these characters would actually say.
Yeah,
because the characters feel so perfectly constructed.
This Cary Grant as this character Roger Thornhill, which probably, I don't know, top 10 character ever. You know, film.
he's definitely great.
It's just like the greatest character. Like, and Cary Grant plays, I'll just describe him. He's like a man's man. He's like he got this smooth style. Like he's older, women want him, men want to be him. You know, he's quick with comeback, snappy jokes. You know, he's just like just perfect. And he's an active protagonist in this too, which is like such a cool thing. And what I mean by that also is he doesn't know what's going on, and but he's still just so confident and so just like slick and sure of himself that, if he just keeps pushing through, he'll eventually figure everything out and everything will go back to being all right. And it'll get figured out. He just keeps pushing the plot, and it's just such a cool thing to do. And he does that because it just sells it so well as this character. Like, it's just awesome. I don't know how you can any other way to explain it.
It's all because a guy like Cary Grant is capable of selling that his character is just that awesome.
Right. Yeah. It's like there's like cheer moments in this for just like just enjoying like watching a real movie star.
Absolutely.
And that's what this is. It's
100%.
Yeah. So, and everyone else is great in it too. I don't know. Martin Landau's in this also, and he's excellent.
Yeah, this is I think one of his like first major movie roles. Yeah, like, and he was just that guy just has such a unique face and demeanor about him. So he's just an absolutely wonderful bad guy.
Yeah, Eva Marie Saint also just great. Just as
incredible
like
leading lady.
So mysterious and like you don't, but it is able to like. It takes like a couple different turns where she's kind of like. You don't know if she's really just like kind of is playing him, or is he just like falling for it, or is he just that charming that he's like totally in control of the situation? It does these little like flips, and I think like a lot of it comes from her and just the way she's able to just kind of like play that cat. That's not like, I don't know if it's like a cat and mouse game because it's pretty forward actually, and I don't know. I think you might want to even talk about that when we go into some of these scenes.
Well, sure. How about we do that? Yeah. Because the other thing that North by Northwest is just really well known for is that it contains multiple iconic film set pieces, just things that have kind of made it into the annals of history as just some of the greatest film scenes of all time. So I think there's one in particular that is absolutely like the absolute, continually referenced to this day, but some of the ones from earlier in the movie, there's a great scene where Cary Grant is kidnapped and the bad guys mistake him for a secret agent that they're trying to get information from. Of course, Cary Grant as Roger Thornhill doesn't know what they're talking about, so they just decide to kill him. And the way that they decide to kill him is by filling him full of an entire bottle of bourbon and then trying to make him like basically like fake like he was drunk driving and then like drove off a cliff and died. But because Roger Thornhill is so like incredible, he's able. He's
been around a bottle of bourbon or two in his time,
undoubtedly. But he's unbelievably drunk, but he manages to get the upper hand and then is escaping them driving his car while incredibly intoxicated. So there's just a great car chase where the bad guys are chasing this drunk Cary Grant trying to escape from them in a car. And it's a scene that's as ridiculous as it is awesome.
Yes.
Connor, you mentioned a great shot at the United Nations embassy, where apparently they are actually not allowed to film there, or it's against the law to film there. So they kind of stole the shot. Like they hid the camera in like a. I don't even remember what kind of truck it was.
Some kind of truck, yeah.
And they basically got an image of Cary Grant walking into the United Nations from across the street without any of the authorities knowing. So that's pretty funny. I think the scene that you were referring to, Connor, is the first meeting between Roger Thornhill and Eve, the character that Eva Marie Saint plays on the train, where the sexual tension in that scene is so insane and ridiculous, but every single line is like some kind of innuendo, and it just like keeps getting more and more ridiculous and heightened. But again, like these actors are just so cool and charismatic that like you're like laughing at how ridiculous it is, but at the same time you're like, this is just awesome. Like these guys are so cool. These guys are so capable of selling this ridiculous scene.
Yeah. Oh, that's great.
Then, of course, the most famous scene from the movie, as I mentioned before, is the crop duster chase scene, where Roger Thornhill is being chased in a cornfield by a crop duster that is trying to shoot him or decapitate him, or you know, and that's continually cited as one of the greatest just action sequences of all time. for a very good reason. It is, to this day, just takes your breath away. I feel like it's just incredible. And then the film concludes with a giant chase across the faces of Mount Rushmore. Like, it's just like one thing after another. It just keeps compounding on itself and getting more and more just like exciting, and like it's that classic kind of Hollywood, you know, constantly changing location, constantly changing locales, putting set pieces in interesting places with interesting elements. The whole movie, like part of the entire reason the movie exists is because Hitchcock got the idea to do a chase scene on the faces of Mount Rushmore. You know?
Yeah, right.
Like,
he just kind of told the writer, who's his buddy.
Like, he starts with the set pieces. He starts with the kind of like images he wants to show, and then the story kind of develops from there. So it's just an interesting way to make a movie, and the results speak for themselves, I think.
Yeah, I mean, what more can you say? This is fantastic.
Yeah, I feel like obviously, like a guy like Hitchcock, you really can't recommend enough to anybody. I think all of like we said, all of his movies are like, his body of work is just absolutely incredibly influential, and even beyond just like the most famous ones like Vertigo and Psycho and everything. I mean, pretty much everything he did is worth something, and you'll, again, kind of like Kurosawa, like you feel like you learn something every time you watch one of his movies, because it just teaches you so much about storytelling and filmmaking and how to do it right, how to do it like one of the masters. So yeah, I really couldn't recommend checking out any Hitchcock movie enough. I promise you, he's not just a guy you encounter in film classes and then you can go back to watching modern movies. No.
Yeah,
Hitchcock movies are incredibly entertaining to this day and still are just such a wonderful thing to experience. Yeah. So I would say North by Northwest is actually a pretty good starting point if you haven't seen one. Like, because as we said, it was kind of conceived to be the ultimate Hitchcock movie, and I think it kind of has become in some ways a entry level like Hitchcock film. But I mean, you could also watch Psycho. I mean, Psycho, of course, is one of the most influential movies of all time. You know, you could
this
watch,
this one was right before Psycho, I think.
Yeah, it was. It was the year before Psycho came out. Honestly, you can't go wrong.
Awesome.
Everybody, thank you so much for listening to this episode of Lopes on Movies. We will probably be back next week with something else from my movie collection, and maybe we'll dig into another classic filmmaker. Who knows?